Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. The person would go on then to say, but I also want you to know that if you will not love me in return, I will make your life a nightmare. I will spread rumors and lies about you. I will trash your home. I will make it my life's goal to punish you in every possible way if you won't accept my love for you. Oh. That kind of changes the whole picture, doesn't it? First you hear of this undying love, and then he changes or she changes the whole story. It doesn't seem like a very wholesome relationship anymore. Well, in our chapter 16 of the story, we hear somewhat like that which I just mentioned, but it's kind of in reverse. In Isaiah chapter 13, we hear these words from Isaiah. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, like nations massing together. The Lord Almighty is mustering an army for war. The army, Isaiah says, put together by your God, is made up of the enemy nations that surround you and surround Israel. And that army is about to declare war. And God is at the head of the army, is the commanding officer. You say, whoa, what's going on here? Well, in chapter 14, again, just a few verses later, we hear Isaiah say, the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, that is, upon Israel. Once again, God will choose Israel and will settle them in their own land. So which is it? God destroying and God having compassion and choosing Israel? Which God are we going to have come today? The destroying or the compassionate God? Sounds rather confusing. Israel knew, just as we know from the story, that they had been called out of Egypt. They had been chosen and loved by God. Yet we also read over and over again that Israel could not get out from under the entanglements of the pagan cultures and religions, especially the sacred violence through both human and animal sacrifices. Israel had been called to be different than all the nations. Amos, in our chapter 4 today, says that they are to be like people where justice rolls down like a river and righteousness like a never-failing stream. That's how Israel was to live, and yet that's not how Israel was. They weren't concerned about other people, basically. They were concerned about themselves. And keeping on the right side of God, however that might be, and whatever that might take. And it seems that the sacrificial apparatus, with the many priests and altars and high places and temples, seem to be the way to attract God's love in the minds of the people. Sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice was being made. And yet God reminds the people through Amos, did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, people of Israel? No, they haven't. And basically God is saying, where did you get this sacrificing thing? I didn't give it to you. I didn't ask for those sacrifices. The sacrificial system became such an important system to the people, but it was not pleasing to God at all. What we need to reckon with is the fact that Jesus, when he came teaching and preaching, and we hear all about that throughout the four Gospels, speaks quite differently about the character of God. We don't hear about a God anymore in the Gospels and the epistles, about a God who is going to be at the head of an opposing army. Which is difficult to understand and very confusing. But when we do read about a story about our God as vengeful or violent, as we often do in the Old Testament, if we look closely enough, as well as at the context, we will notice that at those times when that is being talked about, it is the Spirit of God who is slowly but surely changing the way the Hebrew people understood the character of God. For example, since we're using the Sermon on the Mount as our gospel lesson today, and that's from Jesus, of course, and that will also happen in the next 2 Sundays, we note that Moses speaks about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He speaks about that in Leviticus. Anyone who injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury. Do we have then the go-ahead to retaliate and take revenge? No. What Moses is telling the people at that time, again, it's in its context, is that unlike what is going on at the time, revenge and retaliation over and over again from generation to generation, Moses is saying, stop the revenge. Once, and that's all. But then along comes Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount. But I tell you, or you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's Moses. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. And you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Kind of confusing. Moses says it's okay to retaliate. Jesus says no. No retaliation. I think Peter heard those words from Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. And he knows that he cannot retaliate. He cannot take revenge. But later on in Matthew's Gospel, Peter, asked Jesus, not about taking revenge, but about forgiving. Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. I wonder where Peter got the number 7. Well, number 7 is oftentimes the number of completeness. But I think he's also looking way back in Genesis 4, where God said to Cain, who had killed his brother Abel. And Cain had said, I am very much afraid that whoever sees me is going to kill me. And so God puts a mark upon Cain and says that anyone who kills Cain will suffer the consequences 7 times over. Not because God is going to be the vengeful one, but because human beings are that vengeful. And where does Jesus get the 70 times 7 as the number for forgiving? Well, just a few verses after Cain has heard that 7 times vengeance will be taken if he is killed, Lamech, one of his relatives, comes up and says, did you know that I killed someone because they slapped me? If Cain can take 7 times revenge, I can take 77 times. And then along comes Jesus and says, no retaliation. And in the forgiveness that you give, it is to be unending. 70 times 7. And that's not just 490 times, but endlessly. We are to be as extravagant in our forgiving as our Lord is extravagant in forgiving us. What Jesus does in the Sermon on the Mount is describe an entirely different way to relate to one another, inviting us into relationships, not governed by power, but by vulnerability. But that vulnerability grounded in love. So we are not merely created to carry out justice, We are also created to carry out love and to give life. We don't seem to be able to accomplish that very well. As individuals, even as a church, even as a country. Our strength to love so often fails. And so it is God's love that we ask for, because it is God's love alone that can transform and redeem and create anew the life that God has for us. So what we need to hear in Jesus' words today is the invitation to be the people that God has indeed created us to be, and who we are through our baptism in Christ. And we are to be the people who do make a difference to those around us by sharing the abundant love that we have received from Jesus, the abundant life that Jesus has shared with us. May we accomplish that through the gift of God's Spirit within each one of us. For Jesus' sake. Amen.